Ooh, we have 56.7 amps outside. Wow. It is only 3 days until the shortest day down here in Australia and the longest day for most of you guys who are watching from the Northern Hemisphere. And today it is super overcast, super cloudy. There, sun distributing the light through the clouds, making me 56.7 amps. Guys, welcome back to the Off-Grid Garage here in sunny and freezing cold Australia. 4 degrees Celsius every morning for the last couple of days. Freezing temperatures. But this is as cold as it gets, so. 53.3 volts, 97.1% state of charge. Guys, in today's video, we want to have a look at the Seplos version 3 BMS. There is a brand new, well, not super brand new, there is a new firmware out for a couple of weeks now. Seplos has contacted me and want me to test this one. So they sent me the new firmware file, but you can also download it directly from their website. As always, all the links are down under the video. So here in the changelog it says firmware version 1.4 changed to 1.5. So we are dealing with 1.5 now. And there are 6 new features or change features or new options. Let's have a look. Number 1, when the cell voltage is larger than 3.42 volts, the load is gradually reduced according to the logic of requesting charging current reduction according to 1 millivolt increase. Okay, bear with me here. Charging load reduction logic is changed. The voltage is larger than 3.42 volts, starts to gradually reduce the load, and the current is reduced to 0.5 Z at 3.45 volts. So what they are talking about is here, they are basically reducing the charge current into your battery. It is not about the load. This is about charging the battery. Yeah. So if one cell hits 3.42 volts, they start reducing the charge current into the battery. At least they're requesting it from your inverter. And once a cell has hit 3.45 volts, the charging current is limited to 0.5 C. It goes from the maximum all the way down to 0.5 C. For most of us, this whole point does not matter at all because we are not charging our batteries with 0.5 C. Yeah, with solar charging, we are far under 0.5 C normally. So, but yeah, they're reducing the charging current once the cell hits 3.45 volts. Okay, number 2, when the voltage reaches 3.55 volts, cell voltage, the charging current is requested to be 0 amps. So we cannot charge the battery any higher than 3.55 volts per cell. So it says further here, at 3.5 volts, the current is reduced to 0.2 C. At 3.55 volts, the current is reduced to 0 amps. And the voltage is requested to enter the floating charge state according to the current voltage request. So do we have a float charge state now? Can the version 3 of the Seplos BMS do float mode? I probably change this one here to 2A. And I think this next point actually describes the rebulk feature. So keep this in mind. The conditions for requesting the charge current 0 and requesting charge current voltage recovery are as follows. The minimum cell voltage is smaller than 3.32 volts, or state of charge is lower than 96%. Or, third possibility, the discharge current is higher than 3 amps for 2 minutes continuously. So this point here is a bit weird translated, but I think this is the rebulk situation they're describing here. Yeah? Okay, next point is, after overvoltage protection, request charging voltage according to current voltage. This sentence does not make sense to me. I've asked them for clarification, but even the explanation I didn't understand. Okay, then number 4, that's an important one. Cancel charging card state of charge logic. I didn't understand this either. But if you remember, with the current firmware version, it is very, very hard to reset the BMS actually to 100%. unless you do an over voltage protection. Yeah, you hit your 3.65 volts, BMS goes into protection mode, turns off the MOSFETs, and then the BMS shows 100%. Apparently there are other methods to do that, but I could never verify that. I could never trigger it here in the off-grid garage. With all my tests I did with this BMS, I could never ever get a 100% reset without having an overvoltage protection. So obviously this is now cancelled completely. Yeah. Okay, so I now have to go back into our WhatsApp group here because the technician explained it like this. So he said, hi Andy, now there are two conditions for the battery to reach 100%. So the first one is charge the battery according to the ampere hour integration method. And the battery state of charge will directly reach 100% according to this algorithm. Yeah, if you remember before, the BMS was actually stopping at 98.5% most of the time, and then it wouldn't progress any further. Even you kept charging and pumping ampere hours into the battery, the BMS would just sit at 98.5%. He then explains the integration model they use. This is from a mathematical perspective. Yeah, it integrates over the time. So it basically calculates all your ampere hours you charge into the battery, and the state of charge will climb until it hits 100% state of charge. Yeah, there's a bit of a concern here that you actually hit 100% state of charge before the battery is at 100% state of charge. Because if the BMS shows 98.5%, but your battery is only at 95%, yeah, you keep charging, your BMS shows 100, but your battery is only at 96.5% then. So it's not really at 100%, but you can only see this when looking at the voltage, not at the percentage. Okay, and then he explained further, when the battery is charged to 3.55 volts, the BMS will send a 0 amp request charging current to the inverter and enter floating charge state. Okay, so I think we don't actually have a float mode in the version 3 of the Seplos BMS now. I think it will only keep the voltage at 3.55 volts and then floats the battery there basically, yeah, which is far too high. This is why we have a real float mode now in the JK BMS. Yeah, we charge to 3.45 volts, absorb for half an hour, and then we lower the voltage to 3.35 volts per cell and keep it there forever. Well, there will be some changes coming to this method as well soon. Watch this space. Yeah, so this is now the second method to reach 100% state of charge in the version 3 of the Seplos BMS. The ampere hour integration method as well as the over voltage protection which we had before. Yeah. And then there's a pending protocol version 1.3. This is obviously for another inverter or something. It adds some hex data fields, whatever that means. And we can now also pair 18 batteries instead of the 16 we could do before. Because this Seplos BMS does not use the dip switches anymore, they are all on 0, master and slave, and depending which RS485 port you use on the back, number 1 and number 2, you determine which one is the master and which one are the slaves. I made a video about this and explained this all, is linked down below. So guys, obviously these are the changes for the new version 1.5 of the Seplos version 3 BMS. I don't know, they are playing around with reducing the charge current now into this battery once the battery gets full. Is this necessary? Not really. Because we know from all these testing we have done here with cells and batteries, the charge current is actually tapering off when you reach your charge voltage. It does it automatically. Why would you reduce it artificially? I know, some people will now argue, if you have a bit of an imbalance in your battery, you give the battery more time to balance because you reduce the charge current, the voltage in your high voltage cells is not rising as fast anymore, and the chance to reach 3.65 volts is far less apparent when you charge with a smaller current. But I would argue then, if you have an imbalance in your battery, don't hide it, don't camouflage it with a lower charge current. You have to top balance your battery and get rid of this underlying problem you have. I mean, in this case here, it is not super significant for us because, as I said before, there will be only a small amount of people charging their batteries with more than 0.5 C. Yeah, we are talking 140, 150 amps into one 280 ampere hour battery. Not many people will charge their batteries that fast. So we probably don't even see an effect here, except when the number for the CCL in the Victron system changes. So we've got 3 batteries here with the version 3 of the Seplos BMS inside, and we are testing only the middle one today. All of them are running the 1.4 version. So what I have done so far is I have recharged this battery in the middle here. So I used this power charger here to charge this battery to 54.6 volts. And as we know from a previous test, this is close to 98% or so, and this is also what the BMS shows us. So that's a good starting point, I think. We will connect the adjustable power supply now, and then we can fine-tune the voltage in this battery, can recharge it a bit, and then see how the BMS reacts to it. I've also reactivated the test Raspberry Pi we used in the past, and I've installed the RS485 and CAN head on top of this Raspberry Pi. And then I connected these 2 wires as CAN high and CAN low. And on the other side, this cable plugs in directly to the CAN communication port of the BMS. Yeah, on the other side, I have plugged in another LAN cable to the RS485 1 port, which communicates with the Seplos RS485 adapter directly via USB to the computer. And once we start the BMS Studio and connect to the battery, we can see the 97.1% here, 53.3 volts. Got a delta of 1 millivolt only. We are still in the flat part of the curve, obviously. And down here we can see the firmware version 1.4. So let's upgrade this one to 1.5. So before we upgrade to 1.5, I want to have a look in the parameter management. We want to see how many parameters we have. 104, which is crazy, and 79 function switches. Okay, let's do the online upgrade and see if this actually changes. Start upgrading software. We are on COM5. Everything else stays as it is. We go to open. We select the file. Firmware 48100. They only send me the file for the 100 amp BMS. All right, once this is selected, we go to download and now download it onto the BMS. You should also see, yeah, the lights are flashing back and forth. That means we are flashing the firmware. All right, download complete. We close this window. We go back to system monitor, COM5. We click on start the communication. I think the BMS has turned off. It always does it after a firmware update. You push the pin here in the BMS to start it back up. And there we go. We are now on firmware version 1.5. Let's have a look in the parameters. And we are still on 104 basic parameters and 79 function switches. So there's no additional setting or something for a float mode or a float state, as they called it. So nothing has changed here. So before upgrading the firmware on the version 3 of the Seplos BMS or importing the settings from another BMS you already have, you always have to write down these 3 parameters, 89, 90, 91, because especially these 2 are the learning parameters of your BMS. And if you import all the parameters from another BMS, it will also overwrite these learned capacities. Yeah, this is what you usually do with these BMSs. You discharge until 2.5 volts until the BMS turns off. You recharge all the way until the BMS turns off, and then the BMS learns the capacity of your battery. And these are these 2 parameters. See, in this case, the battery has a rating of 100 ampere hours. Yeah, there are 100 ampere hour cells in there. But the actual capacity we measured in this battery was 101 ampere hour. And of that, we have now charged 98.07 ampere hours. So whenever you do an import or a firmware upgrade, these 3 parameters, 89, 90, 91, write them down on a piece of paper. And if they change after you do all whatever you need to do, you put your numbers back in for this battery. So the BMS knows what kind of battery you have there. So, and we are now having a look at this Raspberry test here. You can see the Seplos BMS already reporting 97% and 53.3 volts. So let's have a look. Go into the BMS. We go to details first and have a look. Yeah, it says pack number 1. There's only 1 pack connected, of course. So it should report 100 ampere hours and 100 ampere hours available. So here as well, the Seplos BMS does not actually take into account how full your battery is, but it says there is one battery with 100 ampere hour connected, and this battery is also available. That's why it says 100 and 100. It should say something like 98 ampere hours available or something now. But that's okay. So if we go down, parameters. Yeah, 55.2, 50 amps CCL and 50 amps DCL. And these are the settings we have here as number 102, 103 and 104. Yeah, requested charge voltage 55.2, charge request current 50 amps and discharge request current negative 50 amps. Okay, there you can see all the parameters in the Victron or in your inverter. I always say Victron system because this is what I have, but it will be the same in your inverter as well. So just for the sake of understanding how this new firmware version works, let's set these ones here to 100 and this one here to negative 100, yeah? And then download and download for the discharge as well. And you can see the parameters are changing here in your inverter as well, 100, 100. So in theory, this should all change now when we raise the voltage of the battery. And we're having a look again here in the change log. So it says at 3.42 volts. Here we can see all the cell voltages. None of them has 3.42 volts. Okay, we are on 53. Okay, let me 53.6 here. Okay, so we're charging with around 5 amps. I want to slowly increase the voltage and see what's actually happening. What is the highest here? Position, no, this is here, it says it over here. Maximum cell 3.34. Probably 53.8. I increase the voltage again to 54 volts. And again, 54.2. All right, we are 3.41 volts. I'm increasing the voltage again. Okay, let's see. 3.42 to 1. And we can see a decrease in the CCL in the requested charge voltage to 98 amps already. So I lower the voltage again. So the cell voltage here lowers, yeah, and then it goes up again. So 3.42 volts is exactly the threshold, and then we can see a lower CCL already. Okay, that works perfectly fine. Okay, at 3.45 volts, we should actually see only half of the requested charge current, yeah? So this should go down to 50 amps then, CCL. All right, let's increase the charge voltage again a tiny bit. I just want to speed things up. So this one is rising now and this one is coming down here, 86 amps. And every time this one goes 1 millivolt up, this one goes down. You can see 1 millivolt is about 3, is it 1 amp? Was it 1 amp? So 1 millivolt increase in cell voltage will decrease your CCL by 2 amps. Okay, I've got 55 volts now on the power supply. And at 3.45, we should see 50 amps here. We had 53 amps CCL, 51. And 3.45, and we are exactly at 0.5 C, 50 amps. So that works perfectly fine actually, but looking at these numbers here, I still don't see the point why you would do that. If you have a cell which rises quickly in voltage here, decreasing your charging current to 0.5 C to half of what you have set. Yeah, in this case, we are still charging with 49 amps into this battery now, and no balancer in this world will be able to compensate for this high charging current and is actually able to balance to bring down this cell in voltage. So the verdict here is, it doesn't really matter if you charge with 0.5 C or 1 C into this battery, you will eventually get an overvoltage protection anyway. Because your battery is out of balance and you need to top balance your battery. Okay, now that we are increasing the voltage even further to 3.451 volts, 2 volts, we can see the current is actually tapering off as well. And they were saying here, when the voltage reaches 3.55, we are at 0. And when we are at 3.5 volts, we are at 0.2 C. So this should give us 20 amps charge current only at 3.5 volts. Okay, let's increase the voltage here. And CCL is going down 34, 33, 56 volts. And then we have a 3.5 volts and we are at 0.2 C. Yeah, that was 20 amps. So it would now request a charging current, why are you so loud, of only 20 amps from your inverter at 3.5 volts. So cell voltage keeps rising and the CCL is going down even further. And at 3.55, which is 56.8, 56.4, Actually, I'm just going down again to 56 volts, yeah, which is 3.5 per cell, if they would be all balanced. So we can see here 3.51 volts, yeah, which gives us 16 amps of charging current. So we are charging this one cell here, and all the others, of course, with 16 amps still. So the voltage in this cell will still increase. What kind of balancer would you need to actually balance your pack now? Even if you have the biggest knee with 15 amp of balance current, it will not be able to balance your cell because then you're still charging this cell with 1 amp and the cell voltage will still keep increasing. So that's what I mean. It doesn't make a difference if you charge with 16 amps now or with 50 amps. Yeah, it is only a matter of time until your cell number 8 in this case will increase even further and reach 3.65 volts. Okay, let's increase the voltage further, 56.6. We are now at 2 amps, 1 amp, and when we hit 3.55, we now see already 0 amps. So this would mean we stop charging. I'll just, so we are now a bit under 3.55 volts. I've lowered the voltage now again, and we are still requesting no charge. Yeah. So this is now the float mode they were talking about, I think. I'm decreasing the voltage again in the power supply. We are under 3.55, so your inverter would not charge this battery anymore. So I guess you could call this one kind of float mode now. And you can also see the BMS has actually reset to 100%. I'm not actually sure at what point that was. So now looking at this changelog here again, we've got 3 different methods now to rebulk, to tell our inverter, please charge the battery again. At the moment, it won't charge the battery, so you will only discharge the battery now. So one of them is obviously if one of the cells goes under 3.32 volts. And the next one would be if the state of charge goes under 96%. And the third one is if we have a discharge current of more than 3 amps for 2 minutes. This would then tell your inverter, hey, start charging again. And then I think it takes the voltage, whatever you have in your battery, and sets the CCL accordingly. If you are still at 3.45 volts or something, it would reduce it as we have just seen now. Yeah, so as you can see, we've got kind of a float situation now of the battery, but only because there's no load connected here at the moment. Yeah, if you have an inverter connected and there's always some sort of load on your battery, you will obviously discharge it now. And if the current goes over 3 amps, which is 150 watts only for 2 minutes, it will recharge the battery and keeps it at 3 point whatever you have set. Ooh, I'm just seeing why has the CVL actually increased to 56.4. See here, it sits on 55.2, but here in the Victron system, it is actually requested 56.4 now. What? How does that work? Not that it really matters because the CCL is 0, but why is this changing here to 56.4 all of a sudden? That is a bit strange. Alright my friends, I guess so far this video from today with the new firmware software 1.5 for the version 3 of the Seplos BMS. Well, the first impression is everything works as per the changelog so far, but the question I am having is, why do we need these changes? Why do we need to limit the charge current if one cell hits 3.42 volts? Why can't we charge higher than 3.55 volts anymore? Not that it matters much, but some people want to charge higher. They are charged to a 3.6, even 3.65 volts, for whatever reason they have. Not possible with this software anymore. You know, just a few weeks ago I had a similar, very similar discussion with Peter, who is the developer of the Peter boards, which is called now iBMS. And he was thinking about implementing a reduction in charging current as well, if the voltage in one cell or the pack voltage reaches a certain threshold. And we discussed it back and forward, and eventually we came to the conclusion that it is actually not necessary. And if you reduce your charge current enough, the balancer may have actually a point or a chance here to balance your battery, and you won't have one cell reaching 3.65 volts and the BMS turning off. But this only shows you a wrong truth with your battery, because obviously your battery is not top balanced. And with such a method, you would camouflage it. Yes, you can exactly use this method here to actually top balance your battery, but you usually do it only once. And then your battery is top balanced, and the next time you recharge it, it shouldn't have this issue anymore. And if you fully charge your battery the next time, and it is again out of balance, there is a problem with the battery, and you should not hide or camouflage it with such a method. There could be a loose connection, there could be a problem between the terminal of the battery and the bus bar. You could even have a faulty cell. In this instance, there could be all kind of issues. So from this perspective, I'm not sure if this is really necessary, if we need to reduce the charge current for these batteries, because the current will taper off anyway. So I don't think this is actually a safety feature or so. It is more a safety concern, because it is hiding the top balance issue your battery may have. And now with the new version 1.5 here in this BMS, you cannot turn off this function anymore. So your charge current will automatically taper off, as we have seen in the test here, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I would like to see a function switch actually here, which takes care of this maybe charge current throttling, if we can call it like this. So the user can actually turn this function on or off. But this method here, it hides and camouflages it a little bit, so I'm not a fan of this. It doesn't tell you the truth about your battery when you fully charge it. So then we have seen the integration method to reset the BMS to 100%, as well as it resets to 100% if the CCL goes to 0 at 3.55 volt, which is kind of what this BMS does here, because we don't have any absorption timer. It is actually resetting the BMS a bit premature in this case, because the battery is technically not 100% charged. Yeah, this is why we have set the reset to 100% in the JK BMS after the absorption timer. Yeah, we reach 3.45 volts and then absorb, make sure all the cells are absorbing and top balancing, and then afterwards we reset to 100%, because this is the closest we can get to 100%, but all these features are missing in this BMS here, so we don't have any absorption timers or something. And quite frankly, if you have an inverter looking for the state of charge of the battery, it will stop charging this battery immediately. Yeah, and again, this is why we changed it in the JK BMS after the absorption timer. Because otherwise these batteries, they will never see any absorption time. Usually you have a load connected, and if the inverter stops charging your battery, the load will discharge your battery immediately, and there will be no absorption, no balancing happening, nothing. And this is potentially an issue you will see with the version 3 and this firmware here. You won't see any absorption time or balancing here. And then we are entering this kind of float state situation here, where the BMS does not request a charge current from the inverter anymore. And because you have load connected, it immediately discharges the battery again. So technically it's not actually floating. We are charging it to a certain point and then stop charging, and then it gets discharged immediately. Yeah, and if your current is over 3 amps for 2 minutes, it will start charging the battery up again. So if you have a 500 watt load connected, it will charge the battery to 3.55, for example, stops charging, 500 watt are discharging the battery for 2 minutes, charger kicks in, 3.55 volts again, discharging again with 500 watts. 2 minutes later, again, 3.55 volts. So you will see this microcycling at the highest point of your battery for the rest of the day potentially. And this is something which is not great. This behavior causes actually degradation in the battery. Once the battery is fully charged, you should really lower the voltage, go down to 3.35 volts and hold it there. But cycling it at the highest point, 2 minutes charging, 2 minutes discharging, I'm not a fan. And if you have only a very small load connected, like a standby load during the day, it would discharge the battery down to 96%, and then the charger would kick in and charge it all the way up to 100%. So you also will have a cycling between 100% and 96%. 100, 96. And every time you hit 100, it reaches this high voltage again multiple times during the day. Or if one of the cells goes under 3.32 volts, it triggers the recharge of your battery again. So turning on a motor somewhere, this would be enough to trigger another full recharge. Okay, my friends, I think that's all I have for you today, testing the new firmware here from the Seplos version 3 BMS. As always, I link the download website from Seplos down below. I've got this information on my Google Drive as well, because you need to have an account with Seplos to download the information. So as an overall verdict, I would say it doesn't bring anything new to the table. Yeah, they are trying to do a bit of floating and do a 100% reset and stuff like this. So it is not really improving the situation of this BMS a lot. Yes, the reset to 100% works now a lot better, but it is still not perfect. It is still not the point of truth, especially if you have an inverter connected which listens to the state of charge which comes from the BMS. You may not see any absorption or balance time for your battery. So overall, a few little improvements here and there, but in my opinion, it is still light years away from what we actually should have in a battery management system. Guys, as always, let me know what you think about this new firmware here. Are you going to install it, or do you keep the old version 1.4 or even an older version because it just works with your battery? That's brilliant. Never change a running system, right? And thank you so much for 111,032 subscribers. Welcome to all the new viewers, and welcome back to everyone else. Thank you so much for all your ongoing support here on the channel. Without you, these videos wouldn't be possible. As always, a special thanks goes to all the people who are donating to the channel, buying me a beer, a smoothie, a coffee, becoming a channel member, as well as everyone who is leaving comments under the videos. This all helps a lot. Thank you very much for that. And also, as always, please do not send me emails. Leave all your comments under the videos in the comment section. Other people will help me out replying to your requests, because we are all a great community here. And until the next video, guys, when we do something else, something different again, yeah? Until then, guys, you stay charged, stay safe, and thanks again for watching. See you then. Bye-bye. Here it is. Version 1.5 of the Seplos version 3 BMS.